I do remember seeing an image of an aboleth ever since the very first video that we ever did on D&D, pretty sure. And though, they were pretty freaky. So I decided today, you know what, I might as well learn a bit more about them. Of course, before we begin, go and support the Exploring series. They make incredible videos on SCP, D&D, as well as 40k, so yeah, make sure to go support them. Link to the original video is always at the top of the description.
The dark depths of water, from oceans to underground caves, can hold many terrors. This is true for real life, certainly, but
Yeah,
undoubtedly true for fantasy settings. In such locales,
yeah.
life is generally selfish and centered around survival, and the biggest, scariest creatures have the easiest time of it. In some deep bodies of water, the scariest creature might certainly be an aboleth. Larger, older, and smarter than almost anything else around, aboleths lurk in dark corners of the earth and feast on the minds and bodies of anyone foolish enough to wander close.
Minds and bodies. Do we have a similar situation to like the mind flayers? I mean, we do have the tentacle situation going on, but it's probably not exactly the same.
They are absolutely not a threat to be taken lightly, but their presence might occasionally call for heroes to step in and deal with them. Let's look at the aboleth's publication history and what exactly makes them tick.
I wonder what kind of scenario you would call a hero down to defeat an aboleth, because they usually lurk in the deep, deep waters, right? I suppose if there was like some sort of underwater city with the fish folk or whatever, and maybe they need some help dealing with it. Who knows? I don't know.
Aboleths are one of the oldest and most popular creatures to be presented throughout D&D's history, going back to 1981. They first appeared in a module for AD&D First Edition called Dwellers of the Forbidden City, where an aboleth was worshipped as a god by a group of mongrel men, who regularly brought it sacrifices. The aboleth was then officially laid out in the Monster Manual 2 in 1983, and would go on to be included in every monster manual for each D&D edition. Quite the privilege. Other types of aboleths would be explored over the years, including in an article in the Dragon magazine, issue 131 in 1988,
several types
titled Ecology of the Aboleth. The greatest source of information about the aboleth, however, is from the book Lords of Madness, written for D&D 3.5 edition in 2005, which features an entire chapter devoted to the amphibians. I'll primarily be using this source to discuss them. An average aboleth resembles a combination of a fish and a squid, mixed with something you might find lurking at the bottom of the deepest sea.
Yeah.
They typically measure 20 feet long and weigh around 6,500 pounds, but the older they get, the larger they grow, and aboleths tend to live a very long time indeed.
Not a surprise for a deep-sea creature.
Each aboleth has 4 lengthy tentacles that they use to capture prey, as well as moving their bodies outside of water by pulling on nearby surfaces. In the water, aboleths will use their powerful tail to push forward, resembling a snake more than a fish while moving.
Or maybe it looks like a deep-sea creature, but sometimes it roams up to the surface, so then it kind of like ambushes unsuspecting victims on the shore of like a lake or the ocean. That's probably the situation here.
An aboleth's mouth resembles a triangle when fully open, about 2 feet across on each side, with 3 long, thin stalks tipped with bony spikes used to push food into its mouth. A number of large orifices cover an aboleth's body, each used to breathe, smell, speak, and expel mucus. This slimy mucus that the aboleth vents from its body is how the creature breathes, and if it loses the ability to create this mucus, it will quickly suffocate.
I remember like real life amphibians are kind of the same way. I'm not an expert on the subject, but I do recall learning about that a very long time ago.
The skin of an aboleth is actually a thick layer of mucous membrane, capable of stretching out to great lengths, making it quite difficult to cut or pierce.
Need
Out
some
of the
special
water,
tools for it,
this
maybe.
mucous membrane will dry quite quickly, which keeps essential moisture inside of the aboleth's body, but is quite painful and debilitating to the creature. Left out of water for long enough, the aboleth will enter a state of suspended animation, still aware of its surroundings, but unable to move. If wounded in this state, it will quickly bleed to death, but undisturbed, it can last forever, a state known by the Aboleths as the Long Dreaming, a fate far worse than death.
The Aboleths know it.
The interior
as
of an aboleth largely
that
resembles
indulgent?
that of a typical fish, but there are some key differences, obviously. In a large organ similar to a lung called the millithast, the aboleth transforms part of the food it consumes into the mucus that it expels. The mucus mixes with the water around its body, creating a breathable environment, as an aboleth does not breathe water like a normal fish. An aboleth has two hearts, one to pump blood throughout its body, and another specifically to provide blood to its massive brain.
An aboleth is a space marine,
reproduce
confirmed.
asexually, typically once every 5 years, producing only a few eggs at a time. The eggs are placed in an area of solitude and encased in a layer of mucus. The most important organ of an aboleth is, of course, its brain, which typically accounts for nearly a fifth of its mass.
Yeah, it's a big brain boy. You have a heart entirely dedicated to pumping blood to it, specifically. Does this mean it might have some sort of psionic power? Or it has a high level of intelligence?
This brain allows for an aboleth's principal capability, psionic abilities.
Yeah, there it is.
These abilities include mentally communicating with a target, creating intricate illusions in someone's mind, and most horrifically, mentally enslaving an individual.
Oh, well. Pretty much the same deal as, I believe they're called spectators, right? I wonder if aboleths have a kind of civilization or some sort of structure within a society. From what they look like, I would guess that they're more solitary individuals who would like to have their own hunting grounds, because they're pretty massive, so they would need a lot of food. Don't think sticking together would be a good idea for them.
An aboleth can enslave any number of weaker-willed individuals, which they do so for a variety of reasons, from protection to entertainment to food.
Entertainment.
Using a host of minions, an aboleth can extend its reach and influence out into the world, making them incredibly dangerous. Minions are often physically transformed using slime excreted by the aboleth, allowing normally surface creatures to be able to live underwater. An aboleth's collection of minions is often based around their surroundings and surrounding societies.
Oh, so potentially in the first image that we saw in this video, it was more like those were slaves that had been transformed due to the mucus that it secretes into kind of like fish people. And so they just become lackeys who help protect it, I suppose, or like used to manipulate events in the outside world.
So an aboleth dwelling in a lake near a human nation will have a number of civilized races as minions, while an aboleth in the Underdark may have enslaved groups of drow. Not all those who serve an aboleth are mentally enslaved, however, as some might willingly choose to do so as part of some sort of deal made with the creature.
What?
Additionally,
Why?
a successful aboleth will have a number of humans under their control that were specifically bred for that purpose, called scum.
Scum?
In addition to the psionic abilities their brains grant them,
Dang.
an aboleth's mind is also most well known for containing a flawless memory. An aboleth not only remembers everything that it has ever experienced, which is quite a lot, but also retains memories passed down from previous generations of aboleths.
I wonder what this could potentially imply. Previous generations, does that mean aboleths continue to grow stronger and stronger because they also have the memories and combat experience of their ancestors? Is it so much so that a move that somebody used far in the past that got an aboleth real good, but they ended up surviving, will never be useful again against an aboleth? Is that the kind of thing that we're going with? Or is it more like history and just general knowledge that is passed down?
As well as gaining partial memories of any sentient creature it devours. This makes Aboleths incredibly knowledgeable about the world. Their minds an endless source of information about existence.
Okay, so if we maybe link this back to like making a deal with an Aboleth, perhaps there are some crazy scholars or magicians out there who are seeking knowledge, so much so that they would devote themselves to an Aboleth just to gain a hint of that, because they remember almost everything. Well, they literally remember everything that, you know, they know of. So yeah, there's just a wealth of knowledge waiting to be uncovered behind a giant slimy monster.
The disturbing thing is, Aboleths seem to contain memories predating creation, and indeed predating the gods.
Oh,
whether or not these memories are true is another debate, but it's hard to argue that Aboleths are easily among the most ancient creatures in existence. This concept of being ancient beyond reckoning explains a lot about why Aboleths do what they do. They have witnessed countless nations, civilizations, religions, continents, and so on come and go,
rise and
with
fall,
only them remaining. It's said that millions of years ago, the Aboleths ruled the primal world, enslaving every other creature that came into being, and creating a twisted and global empire. Eventually, though, this empire fell, for reasons lost to time.
As all things do.
Some say the slaves managed to revolt, or there was a great natural disaster, or the Aboleths turned on themselves.
I mean, it was the same deal with the Mind Flayers and the Githyanki. Inevitably, somebody figures out a way. Life figures out a way.
The most popular theory, though, is that the slaves began praying to a higher power, calling deities into existence, who came and smoked the Aboleths.
Dang, you got smoked. But imagine being a creature so horrible that the only way you can be defeated is by people believing in God so much that they manifest them. Well, perhaps their belief didn't manifest those gods into existence and they were always there, but it's still a really cool thing to think about, just the scale of what an Aboleth could have achieved back in the day. Like way back in the day.
Regardless of the reason, the Aboleths do seem to share a disdain for the gods, whom they regard as powerful entities, but not actual deities. It's believed, though, that many Aboleths wish to rebuild their kingdom of old and return the world to their hands. Because of this, many Aboleths encountered in the world are actually nomadic members of the race, separated from the Aboleth cities by choice or by exile. In the deepest parts of the seas.
Okay, so they do have a society which they wish to reestablish someday. However, thankfully, there are countermeasures to them, and I wonder how a fight against them would actually go. Assuming that we don't ever fight like a pack of Aboleths, that would probably be an extremely rare case, and if so, it would likely just be in like one of the underwater cities, which you probably shouldn't be there in the first place.
Exist great and terrifying Aboleth cities built with stone and nightmares.
Stone and nightmares.
You've got a pretty good idea.
Gotcha.
Aboleths will occasionally go closer to the surface to snatch a group of slaves and then return them back to the city. A fate certainly worse than death. Very few adventurers have ever laid eyes on an Aboleth city, but it's from these places that the creatures hope to rebuild their kingdom. Other Aboleth variants include those confined to swamps or mires, able to breathe both air and water, and there are also aerial Aboleths that continually reside above the clouds.
Oh god.
The mention of H.P. Lovecraft is quite on point, as Aboleths borrow quite a lot from the author and his Cthulhu mythos. More so than just the obvious points of underwater monsters and alien cities.
I mean, especially since they're supposed to be creatures who existed basically before the dawn of time. Then yeah.
But also the whole idea of cosmic horror, and creatures ancient beyond reckoning, with no care or thoughts whatsoever for human existence.
I mean,
an Aboleth is not an insurmountable foe, as the clever and strong-willed will eventually be able to break into one's lair and slay it, but their knowledge and reach is immensely impressive, and the presence of an aboleth near a society might not always be obvious. Whether in a lake or in the deepest ocean, by itself or surrounded by minions, knowledge is power, and aboleths have plenty of both.
Certainly. Always a constant threat. Nobody knows whether they could potentially rule the world again, or if they're just in a steady state of decline and we don't actually have to worry about them. When I first saw them, I thought that they were just scary deep-sea creatures, but no, not at all. They are far worse, and it is certainly a creature I do not want to run into in any D&D campaign. I'll probably keep on saying this again and again the more I learn about D&D, but I just love how in-depth they go into basically every race, monster, every religion out there. There is just such detail to everything that it kind of boggles my mind that they were able to come up with this and make it into a cohesive world and have things kind of make sense, you know? But I suppose discovering things like this is why I've really been enjoying my time just learning about video game culture lore, basically. But yeah, if you haven't already, go check out an Exploring series. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.